Behind the Door. Written by Winslow Swan. Audiobook narrated and produced by Edward James Beesley. I'm sitting here in the living room, although to me this is a very archaic term for the room, and I am very afraid. I hear the sounds coming down the hallway in this small apartment, along with the other sounds that emit from the building, and all of them make me very afraid. But even with all that, the one thing that truly scares me right at this moment in time is what is behind the door of our bedroom. My name is Richard Jones, and I am your average working man with an average working job who never thought that I would be involved in anything so fantastic as the events which have taken place in the last week. I'm not married, although I was once. Her name was Charlotte, and 10 years ago she was killed in a tragic car accident. Coming home one evening, her brakes gave out and she hit a tree at around 70 miles per hour, catapulting her through the windshield and killing her instantly. The car was totaled, and I was given a life insurance check that would have set me up for the rest of my days. Yes, 10 years ago this week. And tonight, I sit here, afraid. It all began on Monday morning, just before leaving this small apartment at 282 Windsor Drive on the outskirts of the city. I was finishing my coffee when Marcy, the lady I'd hired to come and cook and clean for me, I was never very good at either, said,
"You got a phone call while you're in the shower?"
Marcy is not too unattractive a woman in her late 50s who I met at the office about a year ago. She was one of the cleaning people that the company had hired, and I asked her if she might want a second job. With the wage that I suggested, she readily agreed. A couple of months ago, I suggested she move into the small bedroom down the hall and be a proper full-time housekeeper. There was no sex involved, and I had no interest in marriage. She was very good at what she did, and I needed some kind of companionship, which she gave me. "Who was the call from?" I asked her, straightening my tie and putting on my coat.
"The lady didn't leave her name, only that she would try again later,"
Marcy answered as she cleared away the breakfast dishes. "Well, I guess I was cut short with the ringing of the phone. Walking from the kitchenette, which had a small table in it for my meals, Marcy ate in her own room, I went to the one phone that I had installed beside the front door. I'm not a technophobe, but I do detest cell phones in the home. "Hello?"
"I'm coming home, Richard. Wait for me."
The distinct sound of the click as the party hung up was the loudest sound that I had ever heard. The voice that spoke to me was exactly that of my dead wife. It was the last words she had said to me prior to her accident. I stood frozen for a moment, and was only aware that Marcy had walked up to me when I heard her ask,
"Is everything all right, sir?"
Yes, I tried to cover. "Everything's fine. It's just a wrong number."
"Will he be home for dinner?"
she asked. "Yeah, if I can make it. I'll call otherwise. Expect me around 7, I said as I made my way out the door. By the time lunch had rolled around, I had all but forgotten about the phone call of that morning. It might have been a wrong number, and the other party had assumed that they would reach the person that they were trying to get a hold of to tell them that they would be home soon. After all, I'm not the only Richard in the world. I was home by 7, just as I had told Marcy, and she had prepared a wonderful dinner. We sat and talked and watched some television until about 10:30, when she retired to her room. I suppose I had started to doze off just around 11:13 when the sound of the ringing phone brought me suddenly to my feet. I picked up the receiver. "Hello?"
"I'm coming home, Richard,"
the female voice said. "I believe you have the wrong number," I told her.
"Wait for me,"
she said, and hung up. I put the phone back into its proper place. Looking at my watch, it dawned on me what time it was. 11:13. 7 minutes later, I would receive a call from a police officer telling me of the fatal accident. It is the reason I don't like cell phones. It was on one of those things that my wife had called me, telling me that she was coming home and to wait for me. A cold shiver ran down my back. Sleep would be fitful that night. The phone stayed silent for the next 2 days, other than the general calls that are made every day by normal citizens who lead normal lives. I must confess that every time the phone did ring, I would go into a silent panic. I would ask Marcy to answer, and every time it would be something that either she or I was expecting. No calls from dead wives, thank God. Until 11:13 on Thursday evening. It was Marcy's night off. She would be going to visit friends across town and would not be home until the next morning. "Hello?" I said, answering the ringing phone, not noticing the time until it was too late.
"I'm coming home, Richard. Wait for me,"
the female voice said. This time there was no way that I could deny whose voice it was. "Charlotte?" I could hear the soft breathing on the other end.
"Why, Richard?"
she said before hanging up. My heart fell. My whole body turned to jelly as I collapsed to the floor. I don't know what time I woke up from my faint. I managed to stumble off into the bedroom that was just opposite the one that Marcy occupied. She had asked me why. Why what? What could she possibly be interested in? She was dead, had been for almost 10 years. Why? Was she asking me why I was still alive? Why I had not died of a broken heart and joined her? Or was she asking me why I had killed her? Yes, you guessed correctly. I had tampered with the brakes of the car, and 7 minutes after she had called me, I was very wealthy. The money was practically gone within a year, and there was just enough to afford the apartment and the services of a lonely widow named Marcy who has, I believe, grown fond of me. Talking to her, I found that she is quite well off, but I don't want to progress plans too far ahead of myself. Marcy was back on Friday morning.
"Not feeling well?"
she asked when I arrived at the kitchen table. "Just coffee, please," I told her.
"I got a rather strange phone call last night,"
she said as she sat down with her own coffee. "Really? What about?" I asked, naturally curious.
"Well, it was just around 11 at night. I was still watching the late news from my friend Evelyn's place. You know how she likes to go to bed around 9, but I can't bring myself to hit the hay that early. Well, anyway, I was sitting there when the phone rang. I thought it might be you calling, but when I answered, all it turned out to be was a prank phone call. I didn't think anyone did those anymore."
"What sort of prank?" I asked her, relaxing a little and sipping the coffee. "No one asking, 'Is your fridge running?' And you say yes, and they say, 'You better catch it.'"
"No,"
she told me, laughing.
"Nothing like that. No, this was a woman who only told me to be careful, that she would be home soon, and to let Richard know that he should wait. She hung up, and then I went to bed."
I know that Marcy saw all of the blood drain away.
"You alright? Well, maybe you should stay home today,"
she told me. Home was the last place that I wanted to be. I somehow made my excuses to her and practically ran out of the apartment, passing the phone by the door and feeling myself shudder. I poured myself into my work the rest of the day, watching the clock, willing it to slow down, for I knew that when it was time to go, I would have to leave and go home. Home to the possible phone call that I knew would come. I was so wrong. The phone on my desk rang at 6:27 p.m. Without thinking, I answered it.
"Is that you?"
Marcy said. "Oh, yes, Marcy," I said with a relieved sigh. "I should be home around 7.
"Well,"
she began slowly.
"there seems to be some company coming tonight. She says that she's your wife. She called and said that you should come home and wait for her. I thought that you were widowed."
I hung up the phone and almost threw up. The drive back to the apartment was torturous. I didn't notice the stoplights or the signs of the other drivers. I knew that I needed to get home. It was just before 7 when I opened the door. "Marcy!" I called out. The apartment was dark. There seemed to be no sounds coming from anywhere. I switched on the light just as the phone rang. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling.
I'm coming home, Richard. Wait for me,
Charlotte said. Who the hell is this? I yelled.
Don't you know me, Richard? You should. After all, we aren't married,
she told me, her voice dripping with menace. This is not a very good joke, I said, trying to play the whole thing off.
If you really needed the money, you should have just asked. Such a shame, but that's all over now. After 10 years, we will finally be together. I really don't like the new body. I think that you could have done a lot better.
She hung up the phone. I stood there and stared at the instrument in my hand. What did she mean? From down the hallway, I heard a low moan coming from Marcy's room. Marcy, you're all right, I yelled out.
Richard,
She said, her voice guttural and unclear. My blood froze.
I'm coming home, Richard. Wait for me.
Marcy said, only her voice was demonic and had the same tonal qualities of Charlotte. Charlotte? I asked, my voice low and trembling. There was a low and hateful laugh that made its way to my ears from the bedroom. So here I sit in the living room, writing these words down in the hopes that my soul will be saved. I confess that I did murder my wife 10 years ago. I wanted the money, just not the woman. I keep hearing the noises coming from down the hallway, and I shudder. It is now 11:13, and in 7 minutes, Charlotte will be home. I can hear the creaking of the bones as Marcy's body is being taken over by my long, dead wife. I don't really want to know. I'm afraid to go down the hall and open the door. Epilogue. The butler did it.